Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me. We got a special guest here as we preview the Fiesta Bowl between Miami and Ole Miss. It's Neal McCready with Rebels 24/7 in the 24/7 Sports Network. Neal, appreciate you taking the time. We chatted a little bit, but let's just get right into this. What can you share with the latest with the coaching staff? I know everybody's very curious. It's such an odd story. It is what it is. What's the latest you can share, and then also just what do you think's been the key for the team to continue to win games with this whole situation?
Yeah, the coaching staff thing is really weird. Charlie Weiss Jr. has been doing the Baton Rouge Oxford shuttle, probably about an hour in the air since the Sugar Bowl. He's was in Oxford yesterday and today. He's big part of the game plan. He'll call the plays. Um, there's some rumblings about him taking a job with the New York Giants actually at the end of this playoff. So there's a world where none of this really mattered with him, which would be ironic. Kevin Smith, the running backs coach, was at Oxford today. I don't know what that means. I really don't. It's bizarre. George McDonald, the wide receiver coach, wasn't. Um, I don't really think Pete Golding cares whether those guys show up or not. Honestly, he cares about Weiss, big part of the offense, obviously. I don't know that the other guys care. I think some people are getting frustrated with it being such a national story, and I keep telling people on our site, you guys, it's a new thing. This has never really happened like this before. It's national news. People are curious. Um, the narrative though has kind of flipped a little from the morons, and that's who it was. The morons that were like, I can't believe they're not letting Lane Kiffin coach. I mean, are you insane? The message that sends as a program. And then what would you be doing right now? Had Lane Kiffin coaching and you won. He's putting a roster together at LSU. Is he going to do that inside the Manning Center at Ole Miss? How does that work? It wouldn't have worked. It's insane. And then to your question about how has this team kind of gotten to this place? I mean, it's a really good program. They won 52 games in the last 5 years combined. They probably should have been a playoff team a year ago, but they blew it. They lost a stupid game to Kentucky at the beginning of the year, and then lost in Florida to Gainesville. I mean, to the Gators in Gainesville. Um, Trinidad Chamblas has played out of his mind, especially lately. He's just been terrific. Kiwan Lacy's been an elite running back all season. They've got a deep wide receiver room. It's an offensive line that's gotten better as the year's gone on. And then defensively is where they've really improved. At the beginning of the season, they just were not very good on defense. They have gotten better. Still not an elite defense by any stretch. It's but they've gotten better up front. They have found another linebacker in Andrew Jones, giving them some depth at that spot. They've gotten a couple guys healthy on the back end that's made them a lot less susceptible. They're still susceptible, but a lot less susceptible than they were early in the year. They kick really well. They punt really well. They're very good on special teams. It's a team that was really close to being undefeated this year. They're 13-1. They lost the one game in Athens where they led by 9 points in the fourth quarter and just played a bad fourth quarter and kind of avenged that the other night in New Orleans against the Bulldogs. And so, a lot like Miami, probably there were probably some moments in October where if you'd said, "Hey, Miami's going to be in the Final Four," you would have said, "No." And I mean, people would have said the same thing about Ole Miss, but here they are.
Yeah, Neil, it's interesting the coaching thing. Just I was talking to somebody today. Look, if you're, I look at it like this: if you're trying to navigate a season, this would obviously be very difficult. But with where they're at right now, I mean, they've shown, you got the play caller, you got two wins in the playoffs. You like you said, they've been very good. I just it doesn't seem like it's going to be as big of a factor as everyone seems to think it will be because again, they're here right now,
Here's the
and I
thing,
think
Chris.
you're
Here's
playing the
the thing.
games. Yeah, go for it.
Lane was a distraction in the second half of the season. This wasn't something I've told people are like, man, I bet you've had a couple of wild weeks. No, I've had about 8 wild weeks. This started the day of the Georgia game. These rumblings were loud that night, and by the next morning, they were. They were full on. Um, this was a major distraction for this team when they went to Oklahoma, when they played South Carolina, when they played Florida, when they played Mississippi State. This thing is hung over them for the Tulane game. Kiffin was trying to be a distraction last week for the Georgia game. Um, and let's make no mistake, Lane Kiffin wanted Ole Miss to lose. I know he got $500,000. I promise you, he didn't want that money. This was this team's playing with a collective chip on their shoulder. I think they're kind of playing for each other a little bit. I think they're playing with something to prove. Um, the coaching, look, Ole Miss might lose on Thursday to Miami. There's no question. If they do, it won't be because of the coaching thing.
Yeah, okay, let's get into game stuff here. You're touching on that Georgia game, and this is going to be different for Miami from its first two playoff games. Ole Miss is on a roll. Look, Miami played two teams, and all plenty of credit for A&M and Ohio State, but both of them are coming off losses. This is different. Obviously, just the makeup of this team, Ole Miss certainly looks different, but they're on a roll. And you're scoring points, 8 straight with 30 plus. You touched the Georgia game; they still scored 30 in that game, over 30. So, I think that's going to be the biggest thing, Neal. Right? I mean, can
Yeah.
Ole Miss continue its scoring against Miami, which has been very good defensively, been very good in the playoffs, certainly. Uh, what do you make of that? Essentially, what's been clicking? I know you touched on Chamblas. We've seen him, and obviously Lacy. That combination, the distribution of five different guys that
Yep.
they can throw the ball to. I mean, it's just been impressive. Just what do you think about the offense? Essentially, what's impressed you as they're coming into this game here?
Kind of everything. They've been really good offensively all year. They just have so many weapons. They can beat you in a lot of different ways. They have a lot of different. It's very difficult to game plan for them because you can't lock in on one receiver, right? You can't say, "Hey, we're going to take away Stribling." Okay, we're going to take away, Caden Lee from the slot. We're going to take away Daquan Wright. They just have a lot of bodies over there, and that's credit to Lane Kiffin. He went and recruited a lot of offensive players. They run the ball well. Chamblas can beat you with his feet. He throws well, and again, they're good up front. Now they're not great up front, but they're good up front. And to me, this is where the game comes down to, right? Is it's not a matter of can Miami get into the Ole Miss backfield. The answer to that is yes. It's can they get into the backfield quickly? Can they be how disruptive can they be? Can they contain Chamblas? Because when he breaks contain, he's a very dangerous runner. He's a willing runner, an able runner. Um, he's a smart player. He's played a lot of football. The D2 thing, yeah. When you're at D2, do you play teams like Georgia and Miami? Of course not. But he's played a lot of football. He's played a lot of pressure football. He's played a lot of playoff football. The moment's not too big for him. He's played in some huge stadiums now and environments. Um, he's a problem that I'm sure that Miami is trying to figure out the best way to attack him, and it's difficult because he's a lot of really talented SEC defensive coordinators have tried to get him, and really nobody has. But to me, that's what it comes down to, right? Miami created a couple of turnovers against Ohio State. They were very disruptive in the backfield. I was watching, we do a show called Pete's Pigskin Preview. It's actually being processed right now. It's going to run tonight on our YouTube channel. And the guy that does it, Pete Deweese, takes really detailed breakdown of teams. And we were looking at Miami today. Miami had Julian saying, watching the pass rush. His eye discipline was not good in that game, and that's a credit to the Hurricanes. Chamblas has been very elite at that, keeping his eyes down the field, watching his progressions. That's going to be the challenge for Miami, right? Is if you bring pressure and you don't get home, he will make you pay.
And I think, obviously with Miami's pass rush, you're talking about the ends and Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor. I think the linebackers are going to be big in this one, in terms of, you talked about contain. Yes, Miami has played dual threat quarterbacks, but, the players kind of said it today, and even defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman. Look, Chamblas is different than what Miami has seen. He's a better passer and a better runner, essentially the combination. I think they're, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how Miami defends it. One thing Heatherman always talks about week in and week out is they want to not just apply pressure and get to the quarterback. Obviously, that's a huge thing, but they want to do it early. They feel like if they can get to a quarterback early, it's not necessarily the sacks, but just apply the pressure. And that's what you're talking about with Julian. I thought Miami did a good job of that. And essentially, it kind of sets the tone a little bit. And then obviously that huge defensive play, and that's they capitalized on it. And I felt like uh, while I didn't see it going that way, I thought that sequence of events, I thought could happen in terms of a touchdown and a big play defensively, or whatever it was, is a sequence. I think in this game, it feels much different. It feels like Miami's gonna have to put up some points, even if Ole Miss doesn't score. It just feels that way, and that's going to be interesting for Miami passing the ball. Neal, I want you to talk about Kiwan. We talked so much about Chamblas and what the passing attack, third in the country, that kind of thing. But with Lacy, him getting going, and Miami's been pretty good against the run all
Yeah.
season long. The last three games, in particular, after that Virginia Tech game, asked Coach Cristobal about what's been different since then, getting back on track. But how big is Lacy in this one? Do you think?
I think he's huge. I think this is one of the real keys is that Miami is very good tackling open field. Kiwan has been maybe the best statistically in the country at making the first guy miss. And so, how does that equation work out on Thursday? Is he able to continue that? Because Miami's pretty aggressive with their guys, their stunts and everything, and they'll do that deal where they bring the extra guy into the box. He fills the hole. It's one-on-one, and they usually have the athletes to make the plays. And hell, they might have the athletes to make the plays on Thursday. Lacy all season has been very, very good about making that guy miss. And then he gets into space, and now he's a problem. I think it's a critical part of the game. And then the other part with Kiwan, and this is where the shoulder injury is interesting a little bit, is that all season long he has been absolutely special in pass protection. He's not a big guy, but he's not afraid at all to put a body in, and he's been great in pass protection. I've heard NFL scouts just raving about it. They love it. So obviously Miami's going to try to bring pressure. They're going to bring the two guys off the edge, and then Bain is going to find the opening, and then he attacks, and that's where a running back has to step in and be that guy, and that's a lot of man to take on. Lacy's been pretty good about it all year. This will be a real challenge for him, though.
And he'll be big on the nickel blitzes with Keontae Scott. They like to bring him as that extra guy. And I think about Lacy in that matchup too. Wesley Bassane had a nice one last game there out of the linebacker spot. They'll kind of send different guys there. Neal, before I get you out of here, let's touch on the defense. As you mentioned at the jump, that playing better. I think from a Miami perspective, already starting to hear some things of like, oh, Ole Miss defense isn't great and all these kinds of things. I thought Carson Beck said a good point when he was asked about the defense. He said, look, when you have an offense that scores like that, and I want to get your take on this too, Neal, or also what's been different. When you have an offense that scores, essentially you're going to get into some games like this where the defense might give up some yards or points or whatever it is, just the nature of the sport essentially. But just what are your thoughts on the defense? What do they do well? I mean, look, when you're winning games, we're not talking about a team that's lost a bunch of games, and you look at the scores, they are keeping teams down. So I think a little bit too much is made on it, but just want to get your take before we wrap this up here on the defense.
Well, they were hideous at the beginning of the year, and that was part of it, right? That we all do this. It's the way media works. It's the way it always has, probably always will. Is we set some opinions early, and we have a really hard time coming off of them. Like Ole Miss was terrible against Kentucky, against Arkansas defensively. They didn't get a single stop in October against Georgia. Literally did not stop them one time. Ole Miss in that game. Keep in mind, here's the crazy stat in that game. You probably already know this. Some of your viewers and listeners might not. Ole Miss scored touchdowns in Athens on all 5 of its first possessions. The 6th possession did not happen until the 4th quarter. They couldn't get Georgia off the field. Georgia didn't punt. They didn't turn it over. Had to settle for a couple of field goals, but they couldn't get them off the field. Lost that game 43-35. So Thursday, when Georgia they were down 6-0, and they had that one possession where they just said, all right, we're about to line up and kick your ass. And they did, marched it right down the field and scored. And I thought, well, here we go again. And that was kind of the end of that. Georgia got some points. Some of those were on a scoop and score.
Yeah.
I thought Ole Miss defensively looked like they grew up a little bit in that game against Georgia. They were very active up front. They won some one-on-ones that they didn't win in October. They were very good on the back end. Um, they were able to get to Stockton some, and they didn't allow Georgia to just dictate tempo with the running game. Obviously, Miami's going to try to run the football. It's their bread and butter. They're really good at it. They're going to get the ball quickly out of Beck's hands into open space. A lot of some of the same stuff that Georgia kind of does with their patented screen game, but they're better defensively. Look, here's the thing, and maybe we'll both be completely wrong, and this will be some 17-13 game, and I'll just go, well, I didn't see that coming, and I'll just admit I was wrong. I think this is a points game. I think both teams are going to score points. It's going to come down to turnovers. It's going to come down to a missed opportunity in a red zone. It's going to come down to stuff like that. No one has stopped Ole Miss all year. And so no disrespect to Miami. I don't think Miami's just going to put up a steel wall and hold Ole Miss to 10 points. On the other side, Ole Miss gives up yards. Now they've been pretty good lately about sometimes forcing some field goals, not letting teams into the end zone. I think red zone is going to be critical in this game, just like it is any other game. Both teams are going to move the football. It's going to come down to who can make a play defensively in the open field, who can limit to a field goal at a key spot, um, some possession stuff, flipping the field with field position, things of that nature. And, you throw in the nerves and the travel and the quick turnaround. Look, both of these teams played physical games. That Ohio State game was physical for Miami. The Georgia game was physical for Ole Miss. I mean, these teams, there's going to be a lot of adrenaline early, and then when that adrenaline kind of wears off a little bit, it's just going to be a football game and two kind of tired teams that are probably going to try to have to, figure it out. Um, and it's just game three with Pete Golding. You don't really have a big sample size to know how he's going to make decisions. Um, but you kind of know what he's going to do defensively, and they're going to throw some wrinkles at Carson. He'll have to answer, and the flip side will happen. I'm sure Miami's got some things that they've seen on film that they're going to try to throw at Trinidad and see if they can get him to make a mistake.
Yeah, that's great. I think that, you touch on the style. I think it's going to be a points game too. And Miami's got to put up points. And I think they're going to have to throw the ball. I thought they were going to have to do that against Ohio State. They managed to get by without it. But yeah, 21 and 20 points in their losses, 10 points against A&M, the 24 against Ohio State. So and it's an offense, in the 40s there in total offense. So I think they're going to have to throw the ball. And I think Carson's going to they're going to have to put it in his hands. I just don't, even if there's some weaknesses with Ole Miss, I don't see Miami just running completely free and just running away from it and piling up a huge yardage total. But obviously that's going to be a big goal. Neal, I appreciate it. This is fun in terms of this is what college football is all about. Not just the stakes, but the styles are different. How the game's going to play out. It's going to be really interesting and fascinating. But I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.